For centuries, the Egyptians recorded every triumph in stone gods, kings, conquests. Their stories were etched into eternity, but carved right alongside those stories is the name of a forgotten rival, a superpower that matched Egypt in wealth, strategy, and sheer might. An empire that invented law codes before Rome, battled pharaohs to a standstill, and then, one day vanished. This is the story of the Hittites. And if you've never heard of them, you're not alone. For centuries, no one had a thing, because after their collapse, the Hittite Empire was erased from history. No myths, no legends, no names passed down. They were so completely forgotten, scholars once believed they were made up, until the earth gave up its secrets. Let's rewind to around 1600 BC. In the highlands of what is now central Turkey, a region ancient people called Anatolia. Here, surrounded by forests, mountains, and rivers, the Hittite kingdom rose from a cluster of tribes into a formidable empire. At its height, the Hittite Empire stretched across modern-day Turkey, northern Syria, and into Mesopotamia. Its capital city Hattusa was a marvel protected by massive stone walls, monumental gates, and sacred temples. But the Hittites weren't just builders. They were thinkers. They wrote one of the earliest legal codes, long before Roman law. They adopted cuneiform script and translated foreign languages. They established diplomatic norms, treaties, and international correspondence. They negotiated. They conquered. And unlike most ancient empires, they didn't rely on myth to justify rule. They used law. They were also among the first to master chariot warfare, combining speed and shock on the battlefield. Their military tactics were brutal and efficient. Their kings led from the front. Their enemies, often Egypt, Babylon, and Mitanni, learned to fear the Hittite war machine. But despite all this, they left no lasting legacy in popular imagination. Why? Part of the reason lies in the fate of their records. Unlike the Egyptians, who carved their history into enduring stone, the Hittites wrote on clay tablets, stored in palace libraries. And when Hattusa fell, it burned. The archives, thousands of them, were buried in ash and rubble for over 3,000 years. It was until the 20th century that archaeologists discovered them and began decoding a lost empire from scratch. And what they found rewrote ancient history. Because the Hittites weren't minor players. They were major rivals to Egypt, and at one point nearly defeated them. Let's go back to 1274 BCE, the Battle of Kadesh. Pharaoh Ramses II, one of Egypt's most iconic rulers, led an army of over 20,000 men to take back the city of Kadesh, which had fallen under Hittite control. But the Hittite king Muwatalli II was waiting. It was one of the largest chariot battles in recorded history. And it didn't go as Ramses planned. He was ambushed. His troops were scattered. Only a last-minute rally and some serious PR spin let Egypt claim a draw. The Hittites not only held Kadesh, they forced Ramses into a peace treaty, the first known international treaty in history. And yes, it still exists. You can see a copy hanging in the United Nations headquarters today. So how did an empire so powerful, so advanced, just disappear? The answer, like so many ancient collapses, is complicated. In the decades following Kadesh, the Hittite Empire began to unravel. Famine struck the capital. Trade routes faltered. Internal rebellions weakened royal authority. And then came the final blow, the Sea People. Around 1200 BCE, as chaos swept the Mediterranean, the Hittite Empire collapsed in a storm of violence and instability. Hattusa was burned. The great kings died. The people scattered, and the world forgot them. For nearly 3,000 years, the Hittites were a blank space in history, until archaeologists digging in Turkey unearthed the ruins of Hattusa and found tens of thousands of clay tablets, including royal letters, religious texts, laws, and treaties. From those shards of language, the Hittites began to speak again. If you're amazed by how this lost empire was rediscovered, hit that like button and subscribe, because next, we'll reveal how one forgotten invention may have made Hittite warfare more deadly than we thought. Here's what makes their disappearance so strange. The Hittites weren't losing when they fell. They still controlled vast territory. They had diplomatic ties with Egypt and Babylon. Their armies were active. Their society was functional, but a perfect storm of environmental change, economic collapse, external invasions, and internal strife tore the foundation apart. And because their language and culture didn't survive in widespread use, there were no descendants left to carry their legacy into later civilizations. It was a cultural blackout. Even the Bible, which references countless ancient peoples, barely mentions the Hittites because by the time biblical texts were written, the Hittites were already ancient history. And yet, Their fingerprints are everywhere. Their treaties shaped diplomacy. Their legal codes echoed in later systems. Their chariots revolutionized warfare. Their city planning and construction methods influenced Anatolian cultures for generations. But most importantly, they remind us that even the greatest powers can be forgotten. The Hittites were as mighty as Egypt, as literate as Mesopotamia, and as advanced as Greece. But because they didn't leave behind towering monuments or lasting mythology, they were buried by time, by ash, by indifference. Only recently have we begun to understand just how central they were to the ancient world. And perhaps the greatest mystery isn't how they vanished. It's how we went so long without remembering them. If this story opened your eyes to a forgotten chapter of history, share it. Leave a comment. Have you ever heard of the Hittites before this video? And why do you think they were left out of the storybooks? Watch next. Greek fire. The ancient weapon that burned on water. A look at another deadly innovation that once ruled the ancient world and disappeared just as fast.